Hey guys, today we're going to create a weather app in React. We're going to be using purely functional components, and this is going to be mobile responsive as always. And we are going to be using a API service in our backend to get the weather data. So if I type in any zip code, we're going to have some simple validation for it. And if I hit the search icon, we'll get all this data back. And just to show you, it is fully mobile responsive. And let's go ahead and get started in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so let's install React. So we can say npx create React app, and then we can say weather-app, hit enter, and it'll take several minutes to install this. And after that, we can get started with the code. Alright guys, so we have React installed, and now we can cd into weather app. Okay, so now we can just say npm start. That'll start our local host, and we can start our project. So here in our file structure, in our source, we just have app.js. So this is our first component. So we're gonna create a components folder, and we're gonna create a styles folder as well. Okay, so we're gonna drag our apps.js into components, and we are gonna drag app.css into styles. So everything's gonna be messed up. We will fix that. We don't need to worry about index.css. We're gonna get rid of this boilerplate and app.js. So we're gonna delete everything inside this div for now. And we don't need this logo. And we'll go into app.css and completely get rid of this. Okay, and we need to change the path that's pointing to the app component in here. So it's going to be components/app. And we need to fix the CSS. So this will be in a new directory. This will be in styles. Okay, that should have fixed everything. Awesome. So now let's get started, guys. So we'll be just kind of referencing this back and forth a little. So the first thing we're going to do is just kind of take care of this background and then create this weather container background as well. So here I'm going to change this to section. I like to use semantic HTML tags. And we can just keep the class name as app. So in app, we will give some styling to the body. And we're going to give this a background color of D6DB-DF. Okay, and then we're going to have box sizing to be border box. And then we're going to give this a color so that any styling that we have will inherit it, unless we manually override it, of course. So we're just going to be DC, DC, DC. Okay, and we're going to just reset the margin and padding to 0 here. And I think that's it. The only other thing we're going to give styling to is the app. So let's say app container here instead of just app. In the app container, we're going to use flexbox to display it in the center. So we're going to say display flex direction column. And so you guys can see what's going on while we code this. I'm going to give this a border for now. Okay, so right now it's at the very top, so it'll change here just in a second. So we're going to do justify content center, and we're going to give this a height of 100 VH. Okay, so you guys can see now the border is all around this. So anything that goes inside this app container will be centered. So we'll just get rid of this border now. Okay, so that's really it for the app component. We're not going to do much in here. We're going to create another component. So this component will be called weather container because this will contain all the weather UI, data, everything. So in here, we're going to create a new file called weather component. Sorry, not weather component, weather container. Okay, so we're going to just have the boilerplate here, import React from React. And I believe we're going to be using some state in here. So we're going to just import use state. And we're going to have a different CSS file for this. So we'll just call this weather.css. And let's go ahead and import that as well. So we'll do import styles weather.css. Okay, so now we're going to create our functional component. It's going to be called weather container. And we're going to have the return here. And we'll just have a section here. And we are going to give this a class name of weather container. And let's export this component. Export default weather container. Okay, so we have that here. Let's go ahead and import it in here. Import weather container. Okay, and let's call it here. Okay, cool. So that's that. The next thing we're going to do is just give some styling to the weather container so we can start working on everything inside it. So we're going to give this background of blue here, and let's grab weather container, and we're going to create all these styles for the mobile side first, and then we'll just add some media queries to adjust them for larger screen sizes. So in the weather container, we are going to have a background of 3949 AB. And let's add some borders so you guys can see what's going on. Okay, so you see how it's centered, and we're going to give this a height of 525 pixels. Okay. And then we're going to give this a width of 80%. And we are going to center this. So we could just use margin auto here, or I believe, if I'm correct, we can just say align items center. Yep, that should center it. Okay. So we have the width. We can get rid of the border. Let's add some box shadow. And this is going to be 2 pixels, 4 pixels, 16 and 0. RGBA, it's just going to be black with 0.5. Cool. And we're just going to give this a slight border radius of 5 pixels. All right, guys, so that's for that. And we're going to add position relative here, because there's going to be times where we're going to need to use position absolute to kind of align some of these things. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is work on this header. So this header will contain the weather title and this input. And this search button we're going to be using an icon for that. So we'll get to that in just a bit. So in our HTML here, and I'm just going to use Shift-Alt-F to use a prettier style, which made it worse actually. I'm just going to Control-Z that. Okay, so we will have a header here, and then we're going to have an H3, and just going to say weather. I couldn't think of anything better, so if you guys have anything better, go ahead and put that there. And in here, we're going to have another div, because we're going to have this input, and then we're also going to have this search button icon, which is going to be a button. So we're going to have the input here, and then we're going to have a button here. Okay, so I'm just going to comment this button out for now. And in our input, we are going to have a placeholder of just zip code. Let's give this an ID. We don't need to give it an ID. What else do we need to do? We need to add some styling to this. So let's give this a style of search input. And we don't need this file structure open for now. And then what else? We will need to give a onChange function event. So onChange, we need to store some state. So we're going to call a function here, and let's just say function update search query, and it's going to take an event. Okay, and let's just call this function update search query, and let's start using useState now. So we're going to say const, we'll say search query, and then we're going to need to set the search query. Okay, so if you guys are familiar with React useState, so this will contain whatever the search query has only after you use this set search query. So once you use, this is a function that you'll, so say we had the event come in here, whatever the value is, we would say set search query event.target.value, and that would place this so that we can use into state, so that we could use this search query anywhere we want to, or pass it to any other child component that we want to. So we'll just leave that for now because that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to also add some validation, but we'll get to that just a bit. I just want to add some, fix the styling here. Okay, so let's go into this CSS, and I'm just going to give this a class name of weather header. Okay, so we can go into here, and I'm going to individually style this just using an h3 instead of giving that h3 a class name. So we can say, let's give everything a padding inside this container. So we can give this a padding of 10 pixels. So that, yeah, there we go. And let's give this a font size of 1.3 or 1.4 rem. 1.3 is fine. And let's reduce the font weight here to 500. And let's increase the letter spacing by 2 pixels. And I'm going to increase the size just a little bit. Okay. And then also for our mobile side, we're going to have it in the center. So we're going to just say text align center. Okay. So now we're going to just style the input. So the input, I gave it a class just for that input, but I also gave it a div. So I can just, there won't be any other divs in here, so we can just say weather header div. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a border bottom of 2 pixels solid, and we can just do EEE. Okay, so that'll be the border bottom here, and let's reduce the width a little. Let's do like 80%. And of course, let's center this using margin auto. There we go. Okay, so now for the input, search input, let's get rid of the background and make it transparent. And let's get rid of the border. Okay, and we're going to add a little bit of padding. Okay, there we go. So the placeholder text needs to be changed because you can't see it. And let's get rid of this outline. And also, I'm going to make this with 100% of the div, so that if a user clicks here, he will be able to type in starting anywhere. Because if we don't have this with 100%, they can't click here. Because the input is smaller. So we'll have to increase it to 100% of the div. And now let's do search input, WebKit, input, placeholder. Here we can increase the font size just a tad bit. Ooh, that's way too big. And let's change the color here to EE. And let's reduce the opacity to 0.8. Okay, we'll reduce the opacity to 0.5. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to change the color of our text here. So here we can just do that. I think we can just use inherit. It should inherit. There we go. Actually, you know, let's change this color to a different type of gray. So we'll use D5, D8, DC. Okay, that's a lot better. Let's see. Yeah, that's a lot better. It was okay. So now we're going to increase this font size to 1.2 rem. Let's see how that is. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to get the search button icon. So the search button icon, we're going to use materialize CSS. It's super easy. You just have to include the link for it. So we can go to CSS, and then we can go to, I think it's components. And then we go to icons, and then we just got to link this, use this link, and we got to do this in the public HTML. So this will be, you can just add it right here. Okay, so now we have access to these icons. So we're just going to copy this language markup, and in our weather container, we have a button here. And in here, we can just give a class name here of material icons. We don't need to use the I class. Okay, and so now we have a button there. Okay, so in here, we're gonna use something called search. Yep, just search. Okay, so let's see how that looks. So we need to get this all in the same line here. So in weather.css, let's do it above here. Weather header, weather header. Oh, why is it doing that? And then we're going to use the button. So for this button, we're going to get rid of this border and also make this transparent as well. Okay, and we're also going to give this a different color. So the color here will be 17A5A9. It's just going to be green. And let's get this all in the same line. So in the div, we have it right here. We're just going to use flex. There we go. So I don't think we'll have to change anything. And for the button, let's add the cursor pointer. Okay, cool. So now that's working. Oh, let's get rid of this outline. Okay, so that's done. Let's reduce this. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is, I guess I don't have this open like the default state, but the default state had no weather to display, and then it had a sun rotating. So we're going to add that function feature here as well. So in our weather container component, let's see here, we can get out of this header now, and we can simply just have another section. We can give this a class name of WeatherInfo. So let's create another state variable here. We will need to use, so this will contain all the weather data. So we'll just say weather data and then set weather data. And we need to give this a default state here of empty string. So use state, and we're going to give this a default state of an empty object with some what do you call it, key value pairs in here. So we need to get the temp, and we'll set everything to null. We'll get the humidity, we'll get a description, and we will also get the city. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a conditional here saying if weatherdata.temp is equal to null, question mark, we're going to use a ternary operation. So if it's null, we are going to display in a p tag, we're going to say no weather to display. Otherwise, so we can say else, we are going to call another component. So for now, I'm just going to leave it empty string. Okay, so no weather to display will be here now, and we need to center that as well. So WeatherInfo, let's get some styling going on here. So WeatherInfo, we'll be using flexbox here as well, and we need to give this some height. So let's do so right now we have it at 525 pixels. Let's do 300 pixels, and let's justify center this, and let's center it vertically as well, horizontally and vertically. There we go. And let's give some styling to the p tag. So let me think here. In the p tag, we'll have an I tag with the sun. So let's go ahead and add that as well. So material icons, and I believe it's WB_sunny. Let's make sure. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so in here, we can simply just say WeatherInfo I, and then we can give the color here just as yellow. Okay, and we're going to use position relative here to move the sun. So we're going to say top 5 pixels, and let's move it to the left a little, 5 pixels. Okay, cool. And let's increase the p tag font. WeatherInfo, I think we can just do it in here itself. We don't need to do it in the p tags. But that might give the styling to the sun as well, which we don't. Okay, no, that's fine. Let's give it a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. Cool. Okay, so if you guys didn't know, notice at the beginning, I had a little animation for the sun rotating constantly. It's very simple and quick, so I just thought it would give it a little additional taste to this project. Okay, so we're going to say keyframes. Let's do rotate sun. Okay, so we're going to say 2, and then we're going to say transform rotate 360 degrees. And then in the WeatherInfo I tag, all we need to do is say animation, call this rotate sun, and then we're going to say 5 seconds, infinite, and linear. Alright guys, so instead of having infinite here, I had inherit, probably because of autocomplete. So that fixes the rotation here. So yeah, it's pretty simple. And so now let's go ahead and let's get started with adding the zip code validation. And then we can get onto displaying the data. So in the zip code, it's just going to be a simple regular expression that we're using. It's nothing, we're not going to actually validate against like US zip codes. Yeah, we'll just keep it simple. So let's create a different function here. And let's say validate zip code. And this will pass in a zip code. Let's create a regex expression. So this is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be 0 through 9, 5 digits. And all it's going to return is a true or false. So we're going to say regex.test zip code. So here what we're going to do is we're going to actually validate it. So we're going to say let is valid equal to validate zip code and pass in the zip code. Okay, so if it is valid, we will set the search query. And then otherwise what we'll do is we're going to display, we're going to have some state. So we're going to display a little invalid zip code here, if you guys can see. So yeah, if it's an invalid zip code, then it will display like that. So we're going to do the same thing. So let's have another state for that. We're going to say is valid zip code. And then we're going to say set is valid zip code. And the initial state will just be true. So if it's valid, we are going to set it is valid to true. Otherwise, we're going to set this to false. And you know, we can set this regardless, it doesn't matter. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say it's valid if it has 5 digits, no letters or whatever, and if it's in, or if it's a empty, there's nothing there. Because by default, we don't want, I'll show you. So we don't want invalid zip code to be shown here by default. That just doesn't look, it's not a good user experience. So we can have an or statement here saying, if event dot, okay, so you know, we've been calling this many times, so let's just set it in a variable. Let zip code equal to event dot target dot value, and let's pass zip code like this. It's a lot easier to read. And zip code is equal to empty string. Okay, so now I want to show you guys in state. Make sure, if you guys don't have the React extension here downloaded, you'll want to download it from Chrome. It's very useful for debugging. So here we are going to say, so you can see here now, okay, so another thing. So we can type this infinitely and it's saying it's true. How is that possible? What did I do? Okay, so what we need to do is we need to limit this input. So in order to limit this, in our app.js, not app.js, in our weather container, in our input, we need to set a max length here of 5. So the user will not be able to type anything past 5. But we can't depend on that because a user could go in there and change that max length. So we can't depend on that. We would have to validate it here as well. So now let's look at the state here. So you can see the state is updating, and you can see this state is holding the true or false. So if we type in here, it should be false. Okay, so we're going to say, let's have another or condition just to make sure that is valid dot length is equal to 5. In case the user goes and changes this max length to more than whatever, 5. So now we need to display the invalid zip code message. So now what we need to add here inside the header, what we can do is we can, not inside the header, let's do this outside. It'll be easier to make it responsive. So we're going to say invalid zip code, first thing, and we're going to have this class name as error. And let's see, what's next? We need to have this on a conditional. So this is going to be if, what is this state here? Is valid zip code. Is valid zip code is true. So if it's true, then we won't display anything. If it's false, though, we will display invalid zip code. Okay, so let's test that out. We can, so it'll say invalid zip code till you have 5 digits, and if you type in any letters, it'll say invalid zip code. Okay, so let's give some styling to that. Okay, so we're going to go down here, say error, and let's, first thing, we're going to text align center this. Okay, and let's move it down just a little bit more. Okay, and let's increase the font size here to 1.3 rem. And another thing is, let's get rid of the margin bottom that comes with the p tag, because I saw that it's moving this weather to display message down, and we don't want to push it all the way to the bottom. So the color here is going to be EC7063. There we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we have that validation going. And now we can get the actual weather data. So we will create a different function here. Let's go down here and say GetWeatherData. And yeah, we don't need to pass anything here. And then on this button, we need to add an on-click call GetWeatherData. Okay, so now we need to refer to this documentation here. So, okay, so I'm going to copy the API key and post it as a constant here. So I'm going to say const API key, quotes, and let's grab that real fast. Okay, so if we go down and go to API keys, I'm going to copy that. Okay, and then we can go into the API again, API doc, and let's copy this URL. So we have the API key, and then in the URL, we're going to be using fetch here. So we're going to be using HTTPS here, and we're going to use this api.openweathermap.org/data/2.5/weather, and then question zip, which will have the parameter. And another thing is, we're going to be using backstring, a template string here, so that we can just insert the variable here instead of concatenating it. So here we will say the search query state, and we are going to also have a comma here and just say US. and then we're going to get a promise, and then we're going to say response.json, and then and then we're going to get the data here. And now we're going to set this into the weather data. So now in here, we're going to have an object. So let's look at the response here. So first thing, we're going to have a temp. Okay guys, just to see the data, before I even set it, I want you guys to see it in the JSON response. So I'm going to say console.log data here. And let's see if I'm missing an extra. Okay, I had an extra parenthesis, I believe. Okay, and let's open up the console. And I'm going to just give a 90210. Okay, let's see here. Oh, we need to add the API key here. So after the US, we need to have an and we need to say app ID is equal to, we can just say API underscore key. Okay, so now let's try it again, 90210. Okay, so we get this back. So this is the format that we need to follow. So in our response, in our data, we can say set weather data. Okay, so the temp is going to be data dot, let's see here, main dot temp. Okay, and then next thing we're going to have is humidity. So that's going to be, humidity is going to be data dot main dot humidity. So main is right here, and these are objects of main. And then we're going to have the description here. So the description is going to be, let's see. Yeah, it's going to be in this weather array. So we're going to say data dot weather, and since it's an array, we're going to say index 0 dot, so it's going to be description. Now let's do main. Main will look better because it has clouds with the capital C, and this has overcast clouds. So if you wanted a more fine description, I guess you would use that. But clouds is fine for us. And then we're going to have the city. So we can just simply say data.name, I believe. Yep, which is Beverly Hills. Okay, cool. So now we get that data back. So let's just see. Let's just test it out in our components. And let's see here. So right now the object is going to be null. But let's say if I do 90210, we should get back everything. There we go. Awesome. And this is in Kelvin. So let's write our function to convert that. So we're going to just say convert to Fahrenheit, or if you want to convert to Celsius, all to you. Okay, so this will take in a temp variable, and we're just going to say return. Well, so let's see the conversion. Convert Kelvin to Fahrenheit. Okay, so it's going to be temp minus 273.15 times 9.0. We're going to make these floating point, and we're going to add 32. Okay, cool. So we're just going to call this function right here so we can get the proper data. Convert to Fahrenheit. Okay, so let's look at it one more time. So if I do this in the object, yeah, we'll be getting this temp. So we're gonna say to fixed. So I believe let's just Google it real fast. JavaScript to fixed. And I believe, yeah, we just added at the end. So we'll put everything in parentheses here, and we'll just say to fixed, and we can just say 0. We don't need any decimals. Okay, so that's good. In our GetWeatherData function, we need to have an if statement to check for if the isValidZipCode is to false, set to false. If it is false, then we need to simply return. And we also need to check for if or is the search query empty string, because here, if it's an empty string, we are not setting it to false. So let's just simply test this. So if it is empty string, it won't search for it, but it won't display any error message. So what we can do here is set isValidZipCode to false. There we go. And if we have a valid one, it will disappear. So that's what I wanted to include here. So the next thing we want to do is we need to actually display this. So now this requires a different component, I believe. I think it'll be easier to maintain. So we're going to create a different file called WeatherInfo.js. Let's add the boilerplate here. Import React. We don't need to use any state here, I believe. So we are going to also import the style sheet in case, yeah, we'll need to add some styling. So we'll make this functional, and we're going to say WeatherInfo. We're going to get props, and then we're going to say return. And let's just export this. WeatherInfo. Okay, and let's go ahead and import it here. Import WeatherInfo from WeatherInfo. All right, guys, so now where are we going to add that? So this is where we're going to add it. So we're going to say WeatherInfo. Okay, and we're just going to pass in some props here. So all we're going to do here is pass in WeatherData. Okay, yep, and this is going to be inside a section, I believe, right? So we don't need to add another section inside this section because we can just use this class name to give all the stylings to that data. So to avoid using section again, we can use something called React fragments. React.fragment. Okay, and then inside here, we will just simply, let's see how we have it. First, we're going to have our description. So we can have a bunch of p tags here for the description. So for the description, okay. First, let's use object destructuring to get all of our data. So we're going to get temp, humidity, description, and city from props. So this will take description, and this will, after description, we are going to have city. Just trying to get all the HTML done so that we can load all the data and look at it and see how it is. City, temperature, and humidity. Oh, whoops. Okay. And let's add all of the descriptions. Sorry, the data. So this is going to be city, and just forward thinking here, let's add a div and put every single thing on its own div. It'll be cleaner that way. Oh man. Okay. And one more div. Okay, so let's add temperature in here and humidity in here. And I'm just going to use Shift Alt F to make it pretty. Oh, I think I missed that. Okay, so, and here we're going to have temp, and we'll have humidity in here. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and give this a test. So 90210. Okay, so something went wrong here. Okay, guys, I forgot to put props.data in here because we're passing in data as a prop here. So that's how we access everything. So here we can just say description, and I changed these to H3. And another thing that we'll need to do, let's look at the data now. Okay, so that looks like a mess. I think it's because of this WeatherInfo. So the first thing we need to do here is the default direction is row. So we need to change that to a column. So that looks better. And now we just need to give this styling. So this will need to push down a little bit. So we need to say margin top, and let's see here, 50 should be fine. The only concern I have, let's try 100 to see if it's gonna go off. The only concern I have is because of this invalid. Okay, let's see here. If I do 50, it's a little bit too close. So one thing I can do is I can increase the height here. Let's try like 575. I don't want to make it too big. And we can give this a bigger margin now. And that's still gonna fall off. So let's just try 600. Okay. I might have made all the fonts too big or something like that. I'm not sure, but that's okay. Oh, okay, that's fine. So now let's work on giving these styles to the city, temperature, and humidity. So we don't need to give p tags here. Let's go ahead and give h4 tags. That way we don't need to do any additional bolding or make it stand out. Okay, so let's try that again. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to just simply, what do you call it? Just center this all. So in order to do that, so this weather info section is going to contain, let's see, divs only. So I don't want to mess this up too bad in case, let's say in the future we ever add anything here. I don't want to just call it by a p tag or a div. So I'm going to give each of these divs a class name. And we'll just do weather, let's see, info description. It's a pretty bad. Let's just do weather description. Let's just do weather. Actually, you know what? We need to add weather every time. You can just do header description. And we can add it here and here as well. Okay, so let's get the data back. And now in the, what do we call it? Header description, we can say text align center. Okay, perfect. So a couple things we want to do here. Okay, we need to push this down. I thought we pushed it down. Okay, I see. So we need to push. Okay, so it gets pushed down too much when it's like that. Okay, I see. So I think this error text has a, no, we got rid of the margin bottom. Let me just inspect it real fast. you know what we can do here for the H3 is we can get rid of that bottom margin. So we can say header description H3 margin bottom 0. And did that do anything? Hold on. Oh, that is outside. So we need to do weather info. Okay, so I'm going to reduce the, let's see, when it's valid, it's like this. So I'm going to reduce it just by a little bit now. Let's try 90. And if it's invalid, it goes. So you know what the best thing to do is just increase it a little bit. Okay, yeah, that'll be better rather than just constantly playing with this. And now we can set it back to 100. Okay, these small things really take time sometimes. All right, so now getting back to this. So what we want to do here is add a degree symbol and then add F so the user knows it's in Fahrenheit. So the way we can do that here in the WeatherInfo, I'm going to close this weather container for now. In WeatherInfo, I'm going to add a span, give it a class name, and we'll just say degree symbol. Okay, and here we're going to say F. And then here after humidity, we're going to give a percentage. Let's do that, and let's go give degree symbol. And here we can say content. Content is, and then backslash 00 B0. And let's see how that looks. Okay, and one thing we need to do is say after. There we go. So let's add a little bit of spacing here. And I think that's it for the mobile side. Okay, cool guys. I would probably make this H3 a lot bigger so that these little H4s don't kind of like mix them up. We want to like kind of have a separation, a clear separation. But that's okay. This isn't really a CSS tutorial. I just wanted to show you guys this in React. Okay, so now let's make this mobile responsive. We do not want it to look like this when we have it larger screen sizes. So what we can do here is we can have media queries. So media screen and min width. Let's start with 700. That goes more into the tablets, pixels. Okay. So at 700, let's see, what is it at now? Yeah, so after 700, we want it to look like this. Okay, so how do we get to that? So now we need to change, it may look like a lot, but it's really not. So weather header, and let's see what we have the styling here. So weather header, we don't have any. Do we have? Yeah, we do have a display flex here. So we need to manipulate that. So the flex direction needs to be row. Okay, and so that's there by default. So what else do we need to change? Oh, sorry, not the div. We don't need to change that div. It's the actual this. This does not have display flex. So that's going to be like that. And then the weather header div, let's reduce that width by, let's do it to 50% perhaps. And we are going to use something here to justify it. Justify content space evenly. So that should, oh, sorry, not evenly, between. So that should push it to its individual sides. Okay. Okay, guys, so to get this to the right, we had that space between, but the reason why it's not going to go in between is because we have a margin auto here. So if we got rid of that margin auto and just set it to 0, it will push it to the right. But then what's going to happen is we are going to have this border bottom is going to be at the bottom of the section of the header. So the reason why the header is this big is because there's a margin top and bottom between this for this H3. So let's get rid of the bottom. So in the here we can just say weather header margin bottom is 0. Okay, so now that pushed that. Okay, so here, let's do this. Can we do margin bottom here, 0? So we can do margin bottom. Also, guys, we also need to set the margin top as 0 as well. So here, I'm just going to set this as 0, and that's going to push all that to the top. But here, we can just simply push it down. Okay, and I don't think we need the height to be this big. So in our weather container class, let's reduce the height quite a bit. Weather container, and we can also reduce the width as well. Let's try 400 pixels, and let's reduce the width to, let's say, 70%. Okay, so that reduces it quite a bit, but then everything is missing here. That is because we're going to display the city temperature and humidity side by side. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use flex direction column. So let's first do let's do this now. So that is going to be weather, let's see, WeatherInfo, right? Yeah, WeatherInfo. WeatherInfo. And we're going to simply just say flex direction column. Okay, let's see, does this even have display flex? Let's go back to the weather container. WeatherInfo. WeatherInfo, does it have, yeah, it does have display flex, and it has column, sorry. So this needs to be not column, row. That makes sense. Okay, and let's see. So we can't do that actually. The reason why we can't do that is because this H3 is inside the WeatherInfo. So in order to override it, unfortunately, we will need to do something like this. So we could do that, or we could have this H3 simply in this component right here. But we don't want to do that. I think this is fine. We can just override it. And let's call this, let's see, weather data flex. Okay, so weather data flex will only come into effect here. So display flex. Okay. Okay, so this got pushed all the way to the bottom. We'll need to fix that because the height here is set to, what is that? Let's see what the class is here. WeatherInfo, right? WeatherInfo is set to 300. So we do need to change that. Let's go right here. WeatherInfo. And we need to change this height to, let's say, let's try 200. Okay, let's reduce that. But maybe even 100 will be fine. Yeah, that's fine. And we may even decrease this even more. Let's do 350. Okay, so that's fine. The height can be 100. And now let's get the data back. Oh, did you see that? So that will need to be fixed. I think that is because of the margin we're giving here. And WeatherInfo, margin top. Let's set that margin top to 0, I believe. That should fix that. Okay, we can go a little bit, not completely 0. That's better. Okay, so 90210. And okay, so that's the dilemma. Okay, I got you. So the dilemma here that we're having is margin top. Okay, that's fine. And I'm going to do 75. And let's reduce this even more. Okay. So now what we need to do here is we need to say justify content space between. Sorry, not space between, evenly. And also we need to set the width here to 100%. There we go. That looks a lot better. I personally like this a lot. Let's see here. So if we do that, it'll push it quite a bit down. So what we're gonna do, this is kind of giving some trouble here. So what we're gonna do is just add some height back. Okay, and let's kind of keep the margin at, the width at 80 for this. We don't need that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And like I said, I would probably make this bigger, but since to speed things up, let's forget about that. So here we have this invalid zip code in the center. And when I was developing this, I had it here, but I personally don't mind it being here actually. I kind of like it better. It gives, since there's only one input, it's fine. If there were multiple inputs, I would definitely have it under this search. So I think I'm going to leave it like this. And let's see. So now the last problem we have here is when it gets completely full size, the width is too much. So we're going to add just several media queries now to fix that. So media screen and max min width. Let's say 1350. And let's reduce that to over, let's do 50%. Oh, let's give the class of weather container. And we can do like 1700 or something. We can even do 15, it's fine. And let's reduce this all the way to 40. There we go, guys. Yeah, we don't need it to be that big on a large size. This is just me playing around now. So the major project application is actually done. 1350. We can do, let's see, it's at 80. We can do 60. Oh, didn't change this to 1100. There we go. So that looks a lot better. Alright guys, so that's all I wanted to show you for this tutorial. I know it was a lot of CSS, but I really wanted to focus on the React. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this and learned all about the useState component feature and using functional components only instead of class components. If you guys liked this tutorial and learned something from it, please like and subscribe.